What's going on, guys? It's been a little while, but another video for you today. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the Quest alternator swap. So the alternator went out about 2 weeks ago and blew the belt on it. Alternator seized up. So I figured it'd be a good time to go ahead and get the Quest swap done. So basically what the Quest swap is, we're going to take an alternator from a Quest. It had the same motor. It's got about 125 amps out of this one versus the 80 that comes stock in these. So it'll be a little bit more amperage there, push things up a little bit, kind of get things moving that way. So we're going to go through today on taking the old one out, putting the new one in, and then a couple things you might have to change and add with the new one to make sure it fits. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So first things first, before we get started on anything with the alternator, what we're going to want to do is unhook the battery terminal here. That's just going to make sure that we're not, arcing wrenches across stuff when we're reaching up in there, anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. We're just going to pull the liner off out of here. What that's going to do is give us some access to the alternator from the side right here. It'll make it a little bit easier to get to a couple clips and stuff in the back. So we'll go ahead and just pull this off here. Hopefully it doesn't completely fall apart, but if it does, it's all right. So we'll just pull these off here. If you don't have a tool like this, you can just use a flathead screwdriver, but one of these types of tools, these body pry tools, is worth the investment because you can see it makes it a lot easier to get all these plastic clips to come out. So we'll get all these out here like that. This piece will come out, and then you can see, while it's not a lot of room, the steering components are in the way right here. It does give you a little bit more access right over here into the side, so you can see down over here. A couple of the things that we're going to be pulling out are right in here. So some of the plugs and wires and stuff along the back there. It'll make it a little bit easier to get those out without trying to go in from the top or from the bottom there. All right, so up under here, might be a little tough to see. This is from the bottom here, so our oil filter's right here. This lower bracket here is the bracket that holds the adjustment screw, so this is how you move the alternator in and out just slightly to adjust the belt tightness. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this, we're going to end up pulling this whole bracket off. But what we're going to do first is take this bolt out right here. This one runs through the back to the other side of the alternator, so you can see it right there. The other bolt for this bracket is right up here by the crank pulley, so we'll end up pulling that one out as well. That'll just give us some more room in here, and then we'll put it all back on when we're putting everything back together. All right, so once you got this piece out here, it's these two bolts. I usually just leave the bolts in the holes they came out of because you can see these are very different lengths, so you want to make sure they go back in the right spot. Obviously, it'd be pretty easy to keep these two straight, but in some other instances, they might be slightly similar sizes. So I always just keep them in the same holes. So that's good to go right there. These were both size 12 bolts, so those are 12s right there. All right, so once you've gotten that upper bolt loosened a little bit, you can kind of see it through here. It's the one right here. We're gonna come back over to the side in the wheel well here, and we're gonna start working on some of these things in the back. So you can see here, obviously this lower plug's gotta come off. The one here in the red boot has gotta come off as well. And then the plug for the signal is gonna be over here too. So you can see that one right there. We're gonna make sure we pull all these off so they don't get pulled out of anywhere. Everything, we pull the alternator down. All right, one other thing we wanna make sure we remove here is this oil pressure sensor switch. So it's kind of hard to see it down in here. You can see right here, this plug right here goes to the oil pressure sensor right behind the filter itself. These wires are stretched a little bit long here. So we're gonna unplug this sensor as well, and that's gonna give us some more room in here to work with these wires. Right, so with the wiring out of the way here, you can see we got all that moved. That's gonna expose the third bolt back here. So, might be kind of tough for you guys to see that, but right in here on the back, you can see this is where the plug goes. Right back just behind it, that's where our third bolt goes. So we're gonna go ahead and take that one out. All right, so the bolt on the back side there is now out. Now all we're gonna do is take the front one all the way out. You can see the alternator is really loose now. So here's where you wanna be careful. If you're working directly underneath, you wanna make sure you've got something here to support the alternator while you pull that bolt out, because it could fall right out. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna do it from the side. I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna support it underneath with my hand. So just up under here, I'm gonna hold it, and then I'm gonna work that bolt out. It's finger tight, so it should just come right out. I'm gonna work it out there, and then there should be enough room right down here in front of it to just pull it kind of straight out the bottom. So that's the approach I'm gonna take there. Here's a quick side-by-side comparison. Pull out with the old and with the new. So this is what came out. Again, like I said, it was up in here like this. Basically pulled this last bolt out here, and then just kind of wiggled it off the two mounts until it came out. And then what I did was I just turned it down. Keep in mind the oil filters are right about here. Tilted it down this way, turned it back and forth a little bit, and just worked it, and it fell right out the bottom here just like that. So that's kind of the easiest way I think to do it. I got the old one out here. Now we'll take a little side-by-side look and see. This one doesn't actually seem like it's locked up too bad, so I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but you can see the discoloration on the pulley there a little bit. So that belt did get pretty hot before the belt just kind of said goodbye. So anyway, the new one's right here. You can see it's a little bit larger. So if I put it down next to this one here, you can see overall the body of it's slightly larger. But overall it should be a pretty direct fit. Now I will link in the description of this video, I will link a link to a write-up someone did of it on one of the forums. He's got a couple more details about parts that he grinded flat a little bit here and there, because this is a pretty direct fit, but again, it's not 100% exact. So there's gonna be one or two things that may need to be changed, along with a couple extra pieces of hardware. So this bolt right here did not come with this alternator. I went and got this from the hardware store. I'll leave the dimensions of these. There's 2 bolts that you need to buy, and I'll leave the dimensions of those there. But you can see this one here, the threads are slightly different for the ground, so you do need to buy a screw like that. And then also this one here in the front is slightly longer. You can see there's a little bit more beef down the bottom here and also up in here. So what happens is you can see these two pretty similar. So the factory bolt should fit fine there. The problem comes in on the top up here. So you can see, obviously much thicker here. Now if we take the factory bolt here, I'll let you guys take a look at that. This is the factory bolt here that came out. So you can see it will go through there, but you're gonna be left with nothing thread-wise to get to the back. So you wanna go ahead and just get a same thread, much longer bolt there. And so what we can do is we can run this one through here, and you can see we've got plenty of threads in the back to make up for, and then now we're about even with the threads, so we should be good there. So just one thing there, that bolt, I will leave those informations in the description of this video, but that's one thing you want to take into consideration, or you can just grind down this piece here. But I think it's easier just to buy a bolt. This was like 80 cents or something like that. So, and then there is also one other spot you do want to grind down. Again, the pictures of the write-up will be in the description there, so you can take a look at that. It's one of these, I forget exactly which one it is, but one of these runs into the oil filter housing just a little bit. So that might cause us to need a longer belt. But we're gonna see once we get this thing in if that's the case or not. Now, I've heard some people have put this in and not need a longer belt. Some people have. I think it depends on what alternator you get, you know, who made it. The housings might be slightly different sizes, things like that. But other than that, they're pretty similar. Another difference here on the top, on the back actually, you can see here. So the signal wires plug in directly into the back here on this one, whereas they plugged in kind of onto the side and the top on the stock one here. So just another difference there. The plug looks exactly the same, so it should fit in there fine as well. Then you can see the positive is going to go right here. The ground was right here. We'll probably actually relocate that up to this one. I guess depends on, you know, which one is closest to allow us some slack on that oil pressure sensor switch wire as well. Otherwise, pretty similar overall. So we're gonna go ahead and start pulling this one back up in there. Now the installation is gonna be exactly the same, just in reverse what we did. So we're gonna take it, it's gonna end up like this. What we wanna do is we're gonna go ahead and take it up from the bottom, up in like that, kind of rotate it around, and then we'll lean over and put these 2 bolts in. And what I'll probably do is, since I'm holding it with my left hand, I'll probably end up putting the back bolt in first this time, whereas I was reaching across to pull that bolt out. It would be a little easier just to reach back forward like this. So we're gonna go ahead and get that rocking and rolling here. And then once it's in, we'll take a look and see how it fits. Okay, everything's going good so far. So front bolt right up in here. That one's in. The back bolt right back here is in as well. Kind of hard to see. This one right here is in as well. So like I was saying, the alternator came in, back up first, came up, turned around and in. I did thread this bolt back in first. I got this one started, then I went ahead and started the front one as well, so it was sitting kind of level. Went ahead and finger tightened this one down, then went back and finger tightened the front one. Now you're gonna wanna leave them finger tight for now. You want the alternator to move like this because again, you gotta put the belt on there and you gotta put the lower bracket back on as well. So just finger tight right now is good. Now we're gonna go ahead and plug our wires back into the back here. So of course your red cover, your positive there is gonna go to the positive here. we're gonna need that new small screw that I've got right here for the ground. There's a couple different spots in the back here that it can go into, so we're gonna kind of see which one works best. Remember, we gotta plug that oil pressure sensor switch back in. So we're gonna plug that in first and then kind of determine where we wanna put our ground after that, because of course the ground can move, the pressure sensor switch cannot. All right, so we're getting everything plugged back in as far as wires go. You can see here I got my signal plug back here, that plugged in fine. I got our oil pressure sensor switch plugged back in, that still reaches. I decided to bring my ground over here, a little bit closer to it so they weren't split out so far. I think on the factory one they were kind of over, I think it was in this hole right here. So I just moved it over to this one up here, so it's a little bit closer there. So the ring terminal is here, and then it has two forks that kind of stick off the side and go down. One concern I had was whether or not they were going to fit around this plastic guard right here. They do just kind of fit just to the inside of it, so I'm going to tighten this bolt up here and see how they are there, but it looks like it should be good to go. All right, I stand corrected. Those two little teeth that I was just talking about, they did end up breaking this plastic cover. Broke it clean off right there. As soon as I started tightening that bolt down, it just kind of popped right off. That's all right though. I'd rather have a good electrical connection here. Make sure that's nice and strong in there and tight versus this, because the boot will cover some of that there as well. So that should be fine. All right, all of our wiring is back in and everything. One thing to mention here as well, whenever you take off electrical connections that are against metal or anything, you always want to make sure it takes some time. Just kind of scuff the surfaces there and make sure they're nice and clean. All right, so as we're putting this lower bracket here back on, make sure you loosen the adjustment screw up here. Loosen that up a little bit, so you've got a little room here to kind of move the alternator back and forth. Because what you're going to want to do is, before you tighten this top screw all the way up here, you're going to want to make sure that the angle of this bracket, the angle this way, kind of back and forth here, is going to allow the alternator to slide on this groove right here. So this groove right here is where the alternator slides back and forth. You can see there. We loosen the screw up a little bit. That's going to allow the alternator to slide back and forth to tighten. You see it moves the pulley a little bit to tighten and loosen the belt. So you can see here it's sliding along this groove, so we're good. So we can tighten this top bolt down here at this angle. Okay, so we're ready to just take these other two belts loose here so we can get the alternator belt on. Unfortunately, the alternator belt is the farthest in on the big pulley down there, so we gotta take those ones off first. But first we're gonna do the AC belt. So you can loosen this nut right here. Of course, if you're doing this job and you haven't blown your alternator belt, you will have already done this process, so you will know what to do. Anyway, you're going to take this bolt loose right here and then use this adjustment screw to loosen this pulley. That pulley is going to go down slightly, loosen the belt, we'll pull it off. Both of these are 14s. All right, then of course for the power steering belt, it's going to be the same thing. This pulley right down here, it's kind of hard to see. Bolt right in the middle, loosen that first. And then of course this screw right over here, it's going to be your adjustment screw. Both of those bolts are also size 14, just like the ones for the AC. Okay, so we're putting the belt on here. As you can see, it is just a tad short, so it just doesn't want to go around that pulley over there. All right, so I did have to end up getting a little bit longer of a belt here. This is the part number I got for this one, 320. So I'm pretty sure it's 32 inches long versus the one we've got here, just the stock belt. I want to say this one's like 31 and a half. So all right, so the new alternator belt's on. It fit really nicely. So I'm gonna go ahead and just button everything up. It's getting a little dark in here, as you can obviously see. So the footage is not gonna be as clear. So I'm gonna go ahead and just finish buttoning everything back up. I'm gonna tighten up the alternator bolts, put the other belts back on, all that good stuff. And then once everything's back on, I'll give the start it up, and then we'll kind of see if we see any noticeable improvements or anything like that. But one thing I did want to mention as well is when you put the alternator belt back on, just make sure that it's sitting all the way on the crank pulley on the top as well. Make sure you're not over top the timing mark tab that sticks off the timing cover over there, just because you don't want to have that caught up in the belt. But I'm gonna go ahead and button everything back up as it's getting a little dark, and then we'll start it up and see what the impressions are. All right, we got everything buttoned up. As you can see, it got real dark real fast. Everything's tightened down, everything all good to go here. So we're gonna go ahead and hop in and fire it up and see if she don't want to go. Okay, so we got her up and running here. So we're just gonna let it run for a second. We're gonna check on the belts, make sure they're all in line, make sure they're not too loose, anything like that. And we should be good. That's gonna be it, guys. So thanks so much for tuning in, watching the video. Hopefully it was helpful. Just kind of a quick overview. Wasn't exactly 100% of a full tutorial, but just kind of so you can see exactly what it entails as far as this process goes. So if you want to attempt it yourself, you might have an idea of what goes into it. I'd say if you have all the parts and everything works out for you right away the first time, you know, maybe an hour-long process. It's really not too bad. So definitely something that's worthwhile, easy doing. You know, if your alternator goes out, you might as well get an upgrade for one, or if you just want to go ahead and upgrade for one as well. So especially if you're running anything as far as lights, sub, all that kind of stuff, if you're running any of that stuff, then it's definitely a worthwhile investment, worthwhile upgrade. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.